Good morning, everybody. My name is Sebastian Paddington, and I'm pleased to welcome you to our second mentoring series, the TNT Aquatics mentoring series. And I'm joined today by a lovely lady, Miss Annette Knott, General Secretary of the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee. And thank you all for attending, both virtually as well as as physically present today. Welcome, Annette.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Sebastian. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to sit and talk with you in this mentoring series. It's very important for mentoring for the young people, and so it's a great opportunity. So thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Annette. So we're kind of continuing with our theme of Olympism. Our first guest was Chantal McLean, who was known as the Morvan Mermaid. She was very interesting, great story. And Annette, as I mentioned, is the Secretary General of the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee. So I'm going to jump straight into some questions to get the ball rolling. So talk to me, Annette, about your path growing up as a young child and your influence of your family growing up, and then we can want to kind of get into talk a bit about your sports and activities at school as a youngster, because I'm really trying to gear this series towards young people and showing them the career and progression that they can take in the world of sports.
So I was very fortunate. I've come from a sporting family. My father was involved with FIFA. He was a FIFA referee. And everybody, my older brothers, all played football. So coming up in sport, I wanted to be a footballer. But unfortunately, fortunate. I said it was unfortunate because I didn't have the opportunity. Now, all the young people have so many more opportunities in sport and I feel that we just need to take advantage of them. So I went to hockey. I think that my hockey colleagues will say, well, yeah, Annette, that wasn't unfortunate because hockey has taken me all the way to the top. It's because of my time in hockey as a hockey player, as a national hockey player, and then as an administrator has led me finally to being the Secretary General of the Olympic Committee. It's been a long passage in terms of that it's taken a number of years. No shortcuts. There's no shortcuts in anything, whether it's in the discipline of training in sport, and I think all of you are online and here will know that when you have to get to the top, it means no shortcuts. And yes, then my parents were very supportive even as a young hockey player, helping to go to training, etc. So parental support is also very important. It's not the be-all and end-all, but it does mean that it makes it a lot easier for the athlete when they have parental support. And if you look at some of our top athletes, and I'll say this, and I'm sure they won't mind, Nicholas Paul, who is currently one of our top athletes, I remember always his parents supporting him, and I say congratulations to them this morning, if anybody's listening from that family, to say that I've seen the support they have given Nicholas, so it was no surprise to us that he's getting to where he is. He still has a little way to go, because we see 2024 Paris as the ultimate for him. He's definitely on that pathway. So I think that parental support is very important. So for you parents out there, it's worth it every step of the way. It helps to your child to build that confidence that is needed. And there's times when things get tough in sport, and to know that you have your family support around you. In the IOC, it's called the Athlete's Entourage. And I'm actually a member of that IOC commission. And my portfolio in that commission is parent support. And we found that for so many of the top athletes, if you really want to differentiate what the difference was, it was that parental support. And the ethos and the way you've been brought up and the standards that you have as a child and the way your parents have instilled in you, those values come all the way through to you for sport. And not just as an active sports person. But as you grow older and you get involved in administration, I could still hear my father's voice in my head when it's decision time. And if you wanted to make a decision that you thought was perhaps ethical or non-ethical, I still hear that whispering. And of course, the value system comes through.
That's very interesting. Chantal McLean also spoke about the support, the parental support, community support. What avenues in Trinidad and Tobago are there? Because, yes, as an athlete, you have coaches, you have clubs you can join and so on. But for parents, there's really not much. I mean, many parents were not involved with sports, so they don't have that experience. And you find very often coaches and administrators complaining about parents and not giving the right kind of support. Are there avenues locally where parents and support groups can get guidance or feedback or support or ideas on how they can best support their young athletes in sport?
I think that you've probably hit on an area that is a gap that we have in our national sporting organizations. I think that definitely there's room for that, and quite often, yes, coaches don't want to hear the parents standing by the sideline and criticizing, etc. But the reality is that without that parental support, and I think especially in a sport like swimming, where you hear that it's early morning, that they're out, and you have to have the parents there with you. I remember one parent from an English team saying that he used to sleep in the car because training, sleep in the car, and then off to work for him afterwards. So I think that there's a gap, obviously, in our national organizations. And maybe now that, as I said, an IOC commission, that where the athlete's entourage is very important, I think that it's definitely something, a template that perhaps we could look at for the national organizations, even as the TTOC, maybe provide that impetus to say to organizations, don't forget the parents, because the parents are very much an important part of your entourage.
Very interesting. So, Annette, you mentioned hockey, and you started playing hockey, and you would have gone to what level of hockey would you have achieved?
I played for the national team.
Right.
Unfortunately, I got injured quite early in my national career, and so I think that because of that, it probably allowed me to start very early in administration, because I wanted to be involved, and so I became a member of the Women's Association at the time in my early 20s. And I got onto what would then be considered, we used to be committees then, but now they're boards and everything else. But yeah, I was on the national committee in my early 20s.
Yeah, that's very interesting, because a lot of athletes, they either get their careers cut short through injury, or they get, not interested anymore in becoming an athlete. And you find that they just drop out of the sporting world, and I find there's so many athletes, former athletes, who have so much to give back. And, I think you are a perfect example of somebody who was an athlete, your career stopped early, and you have risen now to heights even higher than most in the administration role of sport than most athletes would have reached as an athlete. So talk a bit more about your early days in sports administration and how that evolved into your current role. It's very interesting to understand how you started off in this young role in your early 20s. I'm not going to say your age, but you're now at a very high level in the world of sports administration, and we need more persons like you to put Trinidad on this map and have a seat at the table. Talk a bit about that journey.
Well, I think for me, I was an athlete and then went into administration, but there's so many times that young people come to a sport and they don't necessarily want to be the top athlete. They may have come to the sport because their friends are involved. And I would say to national associations, find a space for them. They could start off very early doing the technical aspects of the sport, and so there's a pathway there. And I'll give you the story. In hockey, while I was coaching hockey in Tobago, we had a young guy that came, and he was about 11, 12, and he was a very good hockey player. So we, of course, as a coach, you're ready to excite him into to becoming the best hockey player. And one day he said, "Coach, I'm not interested in playing anymore." And I said, "What? No, you're too good." Da, da, da. He said, "But I don't mind doing the table," meaning as a technical official. And I said, "Okay." And that young man is now one of the top youth technical officials in the world. He's been to World Cup, Junior World Cups, etc. So at 11, he decided that his pathway was not on the field, but off the field. And now his name is Ariel Wallace, and now in hockey, he has gone to the top level. So your pathway in sport doesn't always have to be in the field of play. It can be as a technical official, as an umpire, as a judge. There are many other avenues, and so for sport, if we're involved in sport, we should look at all those other pathways. For me, I'm always been passionate about sport, so therefore I saw my pathway. I couldn't play anymore. I wanted to stay involved. I also got involved in coaching. I was the first female coach that was coaching a championship hockey team here in Trinidad. And so there was a lot of firsts for me as a female, as a woman involved in sport. But I never saw myself as, oh, I'm a female and I'm going to try my best to be there. I just wanted to be always the best at whatever I do. And therefore, even if it fell short of other people's standards, it didn't fall short of my standard, because my standard was to be the best that I could be. And having done that, I've just slowly but surely continued the pathway to where I am now, always wanting to be the best that I could be.
That's very interesting. So you touched on 2 points I want to kind of mention here. So you spoke about the pathways and the getting more involved. What advice would you give to persons involved, young people who want to get into sports administration? What would they do? What would be the next step? Let's say you are injured or you're retired and you're 20 or 25 years old and you want to get into sports administration or coaching. You're from Trinidad and Tobago. You're from Tobago. What advice would you give to persons on the ground who want to be involved in the world of sport moving forward, whether it's administration or coaching or whatnot? What would they do?
So the first step is to be happy to volunteer. And I think many people probably don't even realize, but as Secretary General of the Olympic Committee, I am still a volunteer. And so, people think, oh, well, I need to do it. There's more value to life than dollars and cents. That intrinsic value that you get from accomplishing things, of doing what you have to do. And so volunteering at your sport, in your community at an early age, there's a lot of satisfaction to be gotten from that, whether you're doing an event, where there's a competition and you're part of it in any way, even if it's involved the catering, selling hot dogs. We've always encouraged even the youngest ones to get involved in our club, in selling and doing anything. Even if they want to come and sell soccer bags on a Saturday, and that's all of that. And all part, and those things build up, and that's all part and parcel. Sometimes people come to me and say, how did you arrive as Secretary General of the... I want to be there. And I said, well, you've got to put in the groundwork. And the groundwork means, as a volunteer, you started off, you can't be always thinking of, well, what am I going to earn from this? As I said, more than dollars and cents, you've earned that sense of value for things, that sense of accomplishment. And so for young people, if you're out there and you want to get more involved as a volunteer. We have the youth games coming up, so this is a plug. If you're interested in getting involved in the youth games next year, we will be sending out, and we're looking for young volunteers. We're not looking for the people who volunteered all their life. We're looking for young volunteers, so you get that experience. 71 countries coming here to Trinidad and Tobago from all over the Commonwealth. this will be a great opportunity to start your world as a volunteer. There'll be the different sports, the final sports to be proposed, but that's a good start.
Thanks. And my second question, before I open the floor to some questions, is you spoke about being a woman. And, I don't like talking about being a woman or a man because I don't see a difference. But in the world, many times, there have been challenges with women and reaching a certain level. What have been your experiences as a woman in a traditionally male-dominated field? Talk about some of the challenges, and what advice would you give to young girls or young ladies out there who want to achieve the highest levels in the world of sports and administration?
Well, what we always say now is you can break the glass ceiling. There's no limitation. For women, I think that for me in the early days, there was that concern about you go into a room. I would go into a conference, and you go into a room and you could count the number of women that are in the room that are there as whether it's secretary generals, presidents, or any other position. Over the years, we've encouraged, I'm chair of the Women in Sport Commission for Knott, which is the Caribbean Association of National Olympic Committees. And what we say to the women, there are no limits. You need to get out there, because for the young girls, they have to see it for them to be it. So anybody out there seeing, now we have a female president of the Olympic Committee, we have a female secretary general, there's no limit. But I think for many of our young women, they need to see more and more of our women out there so that they can, as I say, see it to be it. And that's our motto.
Perfect. I'd like to open the floor to a couple of questions from the audience before I continue. Please state your name and...
Mrs. Knott, you're here now. Mrs. Knott, I'm Michael Nyako, one of the coaches and directors of TNT Aquatics. Mm-hmm. My question, actually, it's twofold. What's the role exactly of the Secretary General of the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee?
So the quick answer to that is chief cook and bottle washer.
Okay. So you represent Trinidad and Tobago on a global stage. Correct. In order to and what's your role globally?
So fortunately for the IOC and for the Commonwealth Games Association, the two most important positions in any organization are the president and the secretary general. And the secretary general, of course, because they have all the institutional knowledge in most cases of what the operations are. Mm-hmm. So for me, my experience came first through games. I was a vice president, and it came through being the chef de mission for a number of games, the Commonwealth Games, the Olympic Games. I was the chef de mission in 2012 for the London Games. And with that type of games experience, the needs of the athletes, etc., that has built on, of course, all the administrative side, but also with the relationships in the Olympic movement and the Commonwealth movement. Mm. So the reality, it's like any other Secretary General for any other organization, you really are in charge of the operational side of things and to ensure that things are, the proper recording of minutes and all that. It's not necessarily glamorous, but very important. So I feel that my legacy as the Secretary General is that there are structures in place that anybody who comes in after me will feel comfortable that things are in order at the TTOC.
Okay. One more question. Mm-hmm. The Olympics is an amateur sport. You talked about volunteers.
That's just me. Huh? The other right. Countries not necessarily.
Right. So that's what I'm coming to. What kind of political influence and sway do you find yourself encountering when you go out on a world stage and you have issues with large amounts of money and large amounts of influence from countries that may be more powerful than others. Have you seen that out there on the world stage, in terms of influencing, I guess, locations of games and then participation of athletes?
I think there's always that well-documented talk about Salt Lake City and all the corruption that went through the IOC, and then there's talk that happened in world athletics, but it was at the IAAF where the president and the terms of corruption, and every now and then we hear of an NOC, a National Olympic Committee, even now, where the whole executive has been dismissed because of corruption, etc. Mm-hmm. So this comes back down to parents and your ethical values that you would have gotten when I started and where my parents influenced me. And that, so it isn't even questioned, because I know that I'm strong and that the ethics that I have will see me through any type of discussion, influence that might be out there. And trust me, there are a lot. People want a vote. And so that, I said, well, a glass of wine? No, don't worry. Nothing you can't bribe me. Mm-hmm. And so you just have to be strong on it. But as I said, from a child, and so important for parents out there, it's what you teach your children that goes all the way through.
Thank you, Mrs. Knott.
Hi, Mrs. Knott. I'm Christiane George. So my question is based on the recently concluded Commonwealth Games. I would like to know some of the experiences you had at the Commonwealth Games, and how can these experiences be translated to lessons that can be adopted by small groups like TNT Aquatics, for example, so that we can grow and develop, and other organizations in Trinidad and Tobago, so that we can elevate our athletes and our general status quo in this field of sports.
So, this I was working out. I think this is my sixth Commonwealth Games. Manchester was the first. And I was, so you think by now, oh, well, it's routine. But interestingly enough, we were sitting at the velodrome waiting for the events for Nicholas Paul and the competition. That day he won the gold medal. So the excitement, it was as if I was nervous, as if I was riding the bike, because you so want it. And everybody in the velodrome kind of excited at that Nicholas, because he was riding so well. And as a proud, almost like a proud mommy, a proud granny, Nicholas it just brought goosebumps, because there you are after so many games, but yet felt so proud of our athletes. It's the same. I was in the stadium when Jareem won the gold medal and broke the record, and everybody comes to greet and congratulate you as if you just ran the race. But those are the moments that really make you proud and make all the volunteering well worth it. In terms of lessons, there's a lesson to be learned every day in life. And something happened at the velodrome before the event, and I was just about to, I wouldn't say blow, but make a big thing of it. And then I got some other information. And I realized, in life you need to listen, you need to take time, and you need to find out two sides of the story, the third side of the story before. Now, I'm talking about me, who's been to, as I say, 6 Commonwealth Games, the Olympics, everything. I learned a lesson about myself that day, and that was, Annette, you need to stop and listen a little bit more and take time to hear both sides of the story and maybe even the third side. And interestingly, there were 3 things that happened that day that all said the same message. And I said, okay, God, I'm listening. So, every day there's something to learn. If you're in a club, so often clubs, people get into big arguments and suddenly the club mash up because all you're asking you to do is to listen to each other. And most important, to respect each other so that there's a message there. So when we're doing activities in clubs, swimming, in this case, is not the only thing that could be taught. There could be other activities that help to have team building. I found in our hockey club for many years, fundraising was a great team builder because we prepared before. Now, a lot of times fundraising, people don't bother. They hire somebody to do the food and then they have the event. What I found over the years was when we all went to clean the chicken the night before the barbecue and all that sort of thing, that helped with team building. And I'm afraid that so many clubs don't do those things anymore. And people say, oh, how much money are you going to make from a cake sale? It's not the money made from the cake sale. It's the effort that comes to bring you together to do the cake sale that is part of team building, and there's no substitute for that.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Patrick. Hi. 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 I'm Patrick Leloy. I'm at TNT Aquatics as well. Chuck, first of all, I'm amazed and commend you on your years of experience and commitment and passion for the sport, for sporting in Trinidad.
Thank you.
So I get it that you have years of experience. Now, did you also have to pursue education as well, a master's degree, bachelor's degree in sports administration, or anything like that?
Well, it's an interesting question because I did hotel management as my first degree. And in fact, that has helped me a lot in terms of organizing things and catering, etc. But I'd been in sport for, I'd say, 20 odd years or more. And FIFA offered the postgraduate diploma at UE. And they actually invited me to the event as an executive member. I don't think I was secretary yet, but as an executive member of the TTOC to come to the opening of this new FIFA program that they were having at UWI. And as I sat there, I thought, maybe I should do this because then it will legitimize the program, everything that I've done. Because you go to tell somebody, I've spent 20 years in administration in sport, and they'll poo-hoo you. But if you go to somebody and say, I have 20 years and I've done my postgraduate diploma, and it actually went on to do the master's. So I did my master's at UE, but I was over 50. And I decided that it was one way of saying to people, yes, I've done many years in sport administration, but yes, I've also done the master's program. And the real benefit of the master's program, well, of course, besides the theory and the education, was for me the networking, and also for the younger students that they were able to get the information, and my years of experience in sport, they were able to get that experience to themselves. In fact, during the first term, I had to leave to go to Delhi for a few weeks. But everybody was happy to give me the information when I got back because they wanted to hear of the experience, etc. So yes, it's a combination of the two, but it's not the be-all and end-all.
So a follow-up to that question then is, there are careers worldwide in sport administration and other fields. And I know you said most of Trinidad is volunteerism. Do you foresee, or is there a path for Trinidad to say, okay, you can actually create a career in this field? So, I mean, there's also positive and negatives that come forward with paid positions, right? Passion for money versus passion for the sport, right? But I know, like a lot of administrations away, they actually get paid good bucks,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So do you foresee a path, or is that never going to happen in the Caribbean, or never happen in Trinidad?
Oh, no, it has to happen. You have to. I mean, as we were lucky in so far in many of the sports, we have very passionate volunteers who've upgraded their skills, etc. But the reality is, if you want structured sport that is sustainable and that therefore that the pathways are clear, it's not going to be an ad hoc, you get a good volunteer today or you don't get a good volunteer. It has to come to the level where you're going to have paid administration that can give you quality delivery. And that's where we will have to be. And therefore, there is a pathway for young people in sport. As I said, it doesn't necessarily have to be on the field of play, but I think that definitely 10 years down the road, this era of only volunteerism is possibly not going to happen anymore.
One last question then. So you mentioned one person who's actually an international, the gentleman from hockey, right?
Yes, correct.
So are there other examples, of people actually pursued or follow up a career internationally? 'Cause I know they have football, the FIFA coaches, FIFA referees and other referees, right?
There's
but
quite a
in
few
terms of sport,
in sport administration.
you don't hear about them. You don't hear about them or write up
Yeah.
about them. It's like a secret society. So, and they're getting paid handsomely. When I found out how much these FIFA refs are making,
Yes.
I'm on the beach relaxing. And he
Right.
says, "Oh, I'm flying first class tomorrow to this other place," right?
That's true. Well, as long as it's football, it's good. Football is the money sport. But the reality is there's pathways there. There's a lot of people in sport admin. I know two of the people that did that postgraduate diploma with me and the masters with me in 2010, 2009, 2010, I think it's somewhere around there. One of them now works for CONCACAF. Another one works in Switzerland with FIFA. So there are definitely pathways. What's also a pathway is in the games program. So some people go from one games to the next. So they would have left the Birmingham Games and then they're off to probably the Asian Games. And then, because there's always a circuit of games. Within your own sport, there would be World Championships, but then they have Asian Championships and Pan American Championships, etc. And so it's really where the sports now, and as I said, 10 years down the road, they will definitely be paid positions in most sports, even at the technical level, because people, if they have to find it, there's no longer room in sport for I can do it in part-time in the evening. If we really want to get to the elite level, we're always punching above our weight, because we volunteering, we're doing this, and yet we're on the world stage. You think that when we think about who we're coming up against, the only way that we're going to do it is if we have full-time athletes, like the Jeremes, like the Nicholas, like a lot of the people in athletics who have done very well. They became full-time athletes. And it's only as a full-time athlete you're going to be able to compete at the highest level, either at World Championships or at the Olympics. It's the days have gone, unfortunately, when you think that you could be the part-timer. And sometimes you see this in football and the European football, that is a team that are part-timers. And it's great excitement, but they don't go all the way to the top. And that's just the reality.
Thank you, Annette. I'm going to jump at a couple of questions I have here. So what steps are being taken to, this whole issue of volunteerism is, it's very pertinent. When I swam in the 1990s, we didn't even have the Elite Athlete Assistance Program, which the Ministry of Sport now has. Remember my Olympic year in 2000, it finally came out. It was 100,000 TT. I was very grateful, but it lasted me 2 months by the time I converted. And all of my sponsors were international sponsors, I had no local sponsors, but international companies sponsored myself and George Bovell, who was young then. So it was very difficult. What you say 10 years, I'm not going to hold it to 10 years, but what's happening now in Trinidad and Tobago to give the audience and give young people out there the confidence or maybe the excitement that there can be paid careers, so you can pay a mortgage, you can provide for your families, you don't have to do this in the evenings when you're tired after working all day in an 8 to 5 job. What's happening on the ground now, or what can the public do or we do to assist the TTOC or any other agencies locally or internationally to allow locals to fulfill a career, a paid professional career in sports in whatever capacity?
I think that the reality is that as a nation, we have to value sport, and we have to see sport as something that people can aspire to. We have, at the moment, some very good examples of young people that have taken that risk and that plunge and have become full-time athletes, but it's not easy. They have to be disciplined enough to get to that level. So Tennille Campbell, who now rides in Europe, it's not, people hear Tennille Campbell, etc. Tennille Campbell will tell you that she traveled to live in Italy. She didn't speak the language. The food was different. It was tough. There has to be that passion. So you don't just arrive and say, well, you have to have the results first that will do it. And I know that sometimes it's the chicken and the egg thing, where you say, well, how am I going to get results if I don't get the support? But we're not different than even some of the larger countries like Canada. Canada will tell you that many of their athletes, have to put out a lot themselves, etc. I think in our programs, that starting from very young age in the schools and the way we physical education and the way we train, it's really a huge bag that we have to fill. First, with the passion for sport, with the support financially from whether it's through the education system, the government system, whether it's through sponsorship. It's not an easy fix, but if we sat back and threw our hands in the air and said, it won't happen, then it definitely won't happen. So we have to find ways, and if you've been that pathway, you have to come back and carry people with you. So we urge and plead for all the athletes and people out there who have had the experience to come back and give back in terms of helping and supporting and networking, because some of the top athletes who have out there, they know people. So it's not about only getting the handouts. The elite program is a great program because it gives athletes now an opportunity to train as full-time athletes. But I think that it has to be a venture that we all have to chip in and help, so that even as with us at the Olympic Committee, when we get out there, we have to look for opportunities for our athletes. So in the Olympic Committee, we had one young girl working with us, Chanel Young. She was an outstanding administrator. She now works for Pan Am Sports as an administrator in Pan Am Sports. She lives in Mexico. So she took the pathway. She's gone to the next level. But it just, you don't want to fool anybody. It doesn't happen easily. But you have to make sure that you are in the right position. In other words, you have the skill set, you have all the attributes that when the opportunity does come, you take advantage.
I really like the idea, of people who have achieved it, who are achieving it. The Dwight Yorks, who are the Man U ambassadors or head coaches in Sydney. You have the Brian Laras, who are commentating on the world stage. I mean, they do give back, and I really like that idea of, people who are making it or who have made it continue to come back locally and try to encourage these youth, because the value of sport, I think the day we qualified for the World Cup, for example, was probably the safest day in Trinidad. I mean, there probably was no crime. You saw all creeds and races dancing in the streets together. It really brought the nation together. Keyshawn landing in Piarco Airport. Yes. Like, these are things that unify the country like nothing before. So I really like that idea. And talk a bit to me about, or to the audience, about the Olympic ideals and how you see these ideals that that sports and the Olympic movement can teach young people to help people move away from lives of crime and getting the passion to really make something of themselves, because the Olympic ideal is not just about sports and getting a medal and making a final. Yes, that's important, but it teaches you all the fundamentals of dedication and discipline and drive and so on. Talk a bit about the Olympic ideals and how that can transcend into Trinidad and Tobago society for the young people and others alike.
Well, the Olympic movement, and we did work for quite a while with the Ministry of Education. There's a program called OVEP. It's the Olympic Values Program. And it does talk about all those ideas of respect for your fellow man, the discipline, stronger, higher, and all faster, all the Olympic mottos. What we need to do, and we have spoken to education, and they're very much aware of it, we have to do more and more of this type of education from the primary school level. And we talked about long-term athlete development. Last year, when we had, it was during the lockdown, and we had quite a few online programs. We had a number of teachers that joined that long-term athlete development program. The reality is it has to be part and parcel of our schools' programs, that where those whole value systems are initiated. I talked about it from the very beginning, parents, ethics. We all know that there's been a breakdown in the family unit. Somebody's eating on with a stool outside, just sitting around the table like we used to do. And if I say that, people think, oh God, you old. But it's not anything that doesn't change. You have a family unit at least once a week. Oh, it should be every day. But, everybody's lifestyle is different. But people should make that effort. No phone policy on the table. Sit down and talk. I think I learned so much about my brothers and sisters and my parents when we used to sit around the table for meals. And I think that whole question of the family unit has changed. It doesn't matter. You don't have to have any fancy dining table. You could just sit together and not be focused on phones or any kind of devices at that moment. It's so easy, just 1 hour a day to be together as a family. And those simple supporting words that you would get from a parent, or a little advice, or somebody just heard about an experience that you probably never even thought about, those things can make a difference.
I fully agree, and I want to make also a plug, not just for parents. When I was a young child, I was 16, went to Montreal, big city, left my family here, but my coaches and my swim team were my family. I remember our sessions would finish before the cafeteria closed, and the coach would invite us over. He would cook meals for us, and you really find that family unit, that was what I enjoyed probably more than the training and the winning and so on. So it's very important to understand that, and people out there to realize that your family unit can be your club, it can be your teammates, could be the guy running next to you, could be your coach, can be your mentor, your father, could be somebody like Annette. It's very, very real.
So when they say it takes a community to raise a child, often people think community meaning the lady down the road chastising you because you didn't do this or you didn't do that. Community means all the people around you and the community that you... So this is a community. This club is a community, and it's this community that raises a child. So that you see that there's a child in distress, you might be able to pull them aside and say what's wrong. And it might be something simple that perhaps you could chat with a parent, or maybe you could help them out. Yeah, I mean, many people who are involved in sport, especially in team sport, when sometimes one or two of your players just don't have the funding to even pay for a taxi or something, and your money comes out your pocket as a coach. But that's all part of community. And I think that, we shouldn't just poo-hoo that phrase. That phrase is very, very important. It takes a community to raise a child. And so maybe we need a little bit more community spirit throughout TNT to get us back on track. We like to think that we've been derailed and gloom and doom, but it could never be gloom and doom as long as you have hope.
Perfect. I'd like to open the floor again to some questions. Whilst they're fixing the microphone, one quick question. So, is there a difference between you're based in Tobago primarily? You also do a lot of traveling. Do you notice a difference between Tobago and Trinidad in terms of community and sport, and/or communities in other countries you've visited? That we can learn from them.
I think perhaps in Tobago, we're still a little old-fashioned, and so that, yes, there's still a lot of community. Because it's small, that people know each other. So if some child comes up and says, or misbehaving, let's use that example, and I make a comment, and they might look at me and think, well, who are you to tell me? And I say, what's your name? And then they tell me their name. And I'll say, well, I know your mother, And then suddenly it makes a difference. So I think when it's still a small community where we talk to, that has made a difference. It happened with two of the national footballers, and they were on the plane and they were misbehaving. And we were coming to Tobago, and I waited for them at the bottom of the step. And so they were like, who is this lady? They didn't know who I was. I explained who I was. I talked to them and I said, I know your name and I know your mother very well. Well, that changed our relationship one time. So suddenly, so those are the simple little things. I think sometimes we're a little even afraid when there's somebody that's not doing something, that we're afraid to even talk to them. No, we shouldn't be, What's the worst that could happen? They'll turn around and be rude, and then you can just pull them up again for that. So, yeah, no. Tobago is fortunate, I think, because we're still a small community. We just came back from Birmingham. The people in Birmingham all came together. It was fantastic. They wanted to showcase Birmingham. They were all out. The policemen were super polite, the volunteers. It was people showcasing their country. So I'm plugging for 2023, and I hope when we have our youth games that everybody, and not I hope, I know that when we have our youth games, people will be happy to showcase Trinidad and Tobago and the positive side of Trinidad and Tobago. Negatives, we can't keep dwelling on negatives. We have to look at the positives.
We're very excited for the 2023 Commonwealth Youth Games. We're also very excited for the 2024 Pan American Masters Aquatics Championships. Please subscribe to our YouTube and Facebook channels to get in contact with us, to get more information. It's going to be great experiences to showcase, like Annette said, the positives of Trinidad and Tobago. When you open up the newspaper, the front page needs to be positivity, needs to be gold medals, and needs to be positive imagery and positive words. And that's what we get through sport, I would say, more than most mediums out there. Michael?
Yes, Michael Nyako again. Community and sport. I came from a small family unit, my mother and me. And my mother never, I grew up in the 70s and 80s. And at that time, sport wasn't, it didn't hold the value that it holds now in terms of being able to have a career and so on. So she never supported the fact that I was doing a sport, so I had to really do it on my own. But if it wasn't for sport or swimming, I wouldn't have met my community, my larger family. My larger family actually saved my life later on because I had to have a surgery, and we had a blood drive, and everybody responded, and so Trinidad and Tobago Aquatics has existed probably around near to 20 years. But also I was a member of Blue Dolphin Swim Club. again, without the support of my mom, because she didn't have the, she didn't acknowledge, she was pushed academics, but didn't acknowledge the value of sport and extracurricular. She thought focus. So I'm glad that I myself at a young age was able to make that decision and kind of break away from the values of my home, which was just kind of like my mom. And through that, I gained a large, loving family. You know, and I think about other young people who may not, you know, put themselves out there or may not have the will to do that. You know, for me, it's made me, you know, I'm really happy with the person I am, and I'm really, you know, I feel loved by the community that came from sport. So I guess, you know, I guess my message too is to parents, you know, get your kids involved with clubs and other activities, because sometimes, especially for single parents or small families, you know, it's very important, because you gain the support and love in a larger community. I know that firsthand. All right, thank you.
I think the important, and we all know it, and I guess people, it's fair that, you know, everybody pushes that academic, so that by the time the children in Form 3, it's like you have to cut sport now because you have Form 4, Form 5, and beyond. But there's one word I always use, and that is balance. And if you don't have balance in life, in every aspect of your life, and as you get older, you understand that word balance, how important it is. And so even when we are heavily involved in sport as coaches and administrators, we still have to remember to give some time to our families, because balance is important. And so for parents who understandably they're a little bit concerned whether their child is going to be the best academic in the world, balance so important. And part of that balance is giving them the opportunity to learn from interacting with other people in a community. And so, you know, it's not just about going to school and the books. There's other aspects of communities that are important.
No, it's very interesting. You know, a good friend of mine, he's international soca singer from Trinidad and Tobago, and, you know, and his parents were pushing him to be a vet. You know, be a vet. You know, what are you going to do and sing in your garage? You know, what are you doing? You know, another friend, he is training swimming. What are you doing swimming? That's not going to make a career for you. And these guys now, they brought so much joy to the world by their swimming and singing exploits. And yeah, it's important that, yes, to have balance and find that balance, because what you're balancing may give you that step up to create a career, and it is something that you love. And if you don't have that balance, you're just going to be stuck doing the same thing all the time. And we may have lost great athletes or great entertainers and so on who had so much potential out there, but that's in the school system. I'm glad you mentioned that, and the parents did not encourage that. That's a very valid point.
Yes, and it's as I said, it's probably fair for parents being protective. What is my child going to do in the future? You know, sometimes, as we call them, the helicopter parents. You need to land the helicopter and let the child get some space, you know?
Great. So I have time for one more question from myself and then one more from the audience. So talk a bit about TNT's future in your eyes. You know, you've been around the block, I won't say for how long, but you're very experienced. You know, you're still very young and sprightly. Very happy that people like yourself are volunteering. What's the future for sport on a whole in your eyes? And again, what else can we do from small organizations such as TNT Aquatics all the way up to the multinational corporations that work here? What's the future for Trinidad? And make a plug for what you would like to see happen and how we can all assist the Olympic Committee, yourself, and Trinidad as a whole to allow us to get to where we want to be as a society that is once again, crime-free, driven and proud like the people of Birmingham?
Wow, you hear that question? Sebastian, you want me to better take over from the Prime Minister now? That's a huge question.
In your words and your eyes.
In my words and in my eyes, I think that word hope, we must never give up hope. Hope for a better future. We can't say we must never give up hope and then sit back and wait. I think even in our little small communities, and I'm going to stress that word communities, we need to look out for each other. Too many people have gotten caught up with the mighty dollar making... I actually thought that after COVID, people would have reflected and thought, think about it. What is important? We sat home for 6-7 months lockdown. We couldn't go to the beach. So people would have had an opportunity to reflect and think what's important in life. Shopping and buying clothes, No, we learned to live a simple life, and yet we were satisfied. And I think that we had more time to see nature, and I think for the long while I saw butterflies. I saw more birds and pelicans in the sea in out there in Tobago, and I thought that, this was however COVID came along, it was a time for us to reflect, and I hope that people learned from it. And as I said, that you have to have hope because you can't give up. So for all of us in our own little ways, we have to get that message across. In clubs, don't only focus on the field of play. Start to do things that will help for holistic development. And it might be having little sessions like this. It might be bringing in a young athlete who's maybe in a different sport, and they'll come and chat to you about how they've progressed. And so I think things like that will help. And of course, as we work towards improving our sport, etc., start to putting structures. I mean, for now, we no longer should be operating out of the back of a trunk in terms of a sport admin, etc. And that back of the trunk story is that people used to have their files in the back of the trunk. Now I guess everything's on your iPad, but still, and not let one person have the burden of the whole club or the whole, because they get burnt out and they get fed up. So it's shared. Again, the word community comes back, and that we must have hope. If we don't, everybody throw their arms up and say, and then makes it worse because everybody goes in their little enclaves and say, well, I'm going to live here because it's secure, etc., etc. Look outside and see what we can do to make things better. That's
great advice. We just do our own part, work together. These mentoring series sessions, we're very grateful to our sponsor IPI to facilitate it. Please, subscribe and spread the word, because if we can impact one life, I think we'll make a difference. If we can save one youth or one, you never know who's going to be the next president of the IOC in 15 years. Why not a Trinidadian? Why not?
And a woman too.
And why not? And a woman too. Again, we have Diane Henderson, ambitious, bright. Why can't she become the president of the IOC? We have the Commonwealth Youth Games here in Trinidad. Why can't we have the Senior Commonwealth Games? Why can't we have the Olympic Games one year in Trinidad, and what that'll do for the economy? So, very important. One more question from the audience before we say thank you to Mrs. Knott for a lovely session this morning.
All right, so this one is a little philosophical, right? So, in order to have development or personal development, one has to visualize. And in order to visualize, you need to have an idea of what can be and what are the possibilities that are out there. You, with your decades of experience, I think your story is absolutely fantastic and needs to be spread throughout Trinidad and Tobago, the region, and internationally, honestly. Have you considered documenting your story or creating a piece of tangible literature to pass on to younger generations so that young girls and boys can see or can read about this other aspect to sport? Because I think it's a fantastic, your story is absolutely fantastic.
Well, I have to say thank you very much. I hadn't thought of it more than me mentoring. There's a lot of young administrators throughout the Caribbean who I would mentor, but not on necessarily a formal basis. So that perhaps there's room there for some formal mentoring. And yes, and perhaps maybe through that mentorship program, telling the story more often. I really appreciate, I had a great morning talking to you to all about the sport and what the progress is. And so really want to thank you, Sebastian, for inviting me. It was a little space in the window while I was in Trinidad between meetings, etc., but definitely worth it. And yeah, you see, I've learned a message there today. Maybe it's time for me to document this story. So every day, you learn something. And so thank you so much, and to IPI for the sponsorship and for me to being here. So great.
Thank you, Adam. And you say every day you learn something. This morning, I can speak on behalf of the audience. I've learned so much, and I'm actually even more encouraged to continue this mentoring series and additional things to really, I see sport as the way to heal Trinidad, to get us on track. And again, not just being an athlete, the administration, the volunteerism, the community, and people will get to, you do it right, travel the world, experience cultures, make friends out there. We went to the Pan American Aquatic Championships, a little swim team, 17 swimmers, and it was such a great experience to see all the people, the communities, and I think it can go a long way on it. So thank you very, very much on behalf of the team here at TNT Aquatics. We really appreciate this. And please spread the word of this video. We'll be posting it and hopefully getting the views up. And again, if we can make a difference to one person, we would have done great.
I think it's a great series, and I'd be happy to even put you in touch with other people up the islands that would be happy to be part of this mentoring series. I think it's wonderful.
Thank you very much. I would love that. And our second guest, thank you very much.